In this video, we are going to look at a market where there's a negative externality and how this market could actually be brought into a situation where it's at the social optimum by using a Pigouvian tax, right? Okay, so the situation we have here, notice that marginal benefit, which is also the demand curve, right? Marginal benefit is the height of a demand curve at any given quantity, right? And here's our private marginal cost curve, right? So that means that, and also here's the social marginal social cost curve, right? So since social costs are greater than private costs, that means that whenever a producer produces whatever good this is, then there are extra costs imposed on the rest of society that the private producer does not incur, right? So that's the negative externalities. That the social costs are higher than the private costs, right? And so when the producer is left to their own devices, assuming they don't care about the social costs that they're incurring on others, then the market will tend towards this point here, where the marginal benefit and the private marginal cost meet, right? So the quantity would be this level right here, which is relatively high, given that that's where the marginal benefit and the private marginal costs meet. Okay, and that level of output is inefficient because it imposes such high costs on society, right? So the social costs are way up here, while the marginal benefits are way down here, and so all of these units that get produced beyond this quantity are actually imposing more costs on society, a higher social cost, than their marginal benefits, right? Okay, and that's another way of saying that this quantity right here, where these 2 points meet, with this point here, where the two curves, where marginal social costs crosses marginal benefit, this is actually the optimal quantity that would maximize total surplus in this market, right? So despite the fact that there's a negative externality, that doesn't necessarily mean that the optimal quantity should be zero, right? The optimal quantity is actually where the marginal benefit crosses the marginal social cost curve, right? And so the idea with the Pigouvian tax is that you can tax, say, the producer and increase their costs up to the point where they would want to produce the socially optimal quantity on their own, right? And so remember, this is a marginal cost curve. So if you tax each unit by some amount, then that means the marginal cost curve with the tax would be a parallel shift of this original marginal private cost curve, right? And so since you want to get it to the point where they're producing this quantity right here, you want their marginal private cost curve with the optimal tax to go through that point there where marginal benefit crosses marginal social cost curve, right? Because then the new marginal private cost curve with the tax will cross the marginal benefit curve at that same point, right? So basically you want a parallel shift in the marginal private cost curve from the tax that brings the marginal private cost curve up to this point where marginal social cost crosses the marginal benefit curve, right? Okay, and so the vertical distance there, that's actually the amount of the tax, right? The optimal tax is given by the vertical distance between these two marginal private cost curves, right? And you can see that the vertical distance is given there by the difference between the dollar amount that is the marginal benefit or marginal social cost at the optimal quantity and the private marginal cost at the socially optimal quantity, right? So at the socially optimal quantity, the private marginal cost is 13, but the marginal benefit is 23, and so we want to increase the producer's marginal cost up to that amount 23. And so by instituting a Pigouvian tax of $10, right? So notice that 23 minus 13, the difference between those two, the height difference between those 2 points. So the optimal Pigouvian tax is the distance between 13 and 23. So this is going to be a $10 tax. Right? So the optimal Pigouvian tax that will bring this market into to a point where they're maximizing total surplus, where it's optimal for society, would be a Pigouvian tax of $10. All right. Thank you for watching.